Welcome to the Pocket Size PR podcast, the podcast where pocket-sized portions of PR wisdom are distilled and applied to real-life situations by communications professionals. I'm your host, Charlotte Nichols from PR agency Harvey and Hugo, and I'm really thrilled to have Kirsten Donkin here with me today. Kirsten is Head of Communications at Double 11. Kirsten, how do you define PR?
For me, Charlotte, PR is about building a connection with an intended audience and building a relationship with that audience.
Excellent. It's all about relationships, and
it absolutely is.
They're critical to everything we do in life. And for me, communications are at the heart of that.
Yeah, they are.
How does PR fit into your overall communications role?
I think PR fitting into the overall communications role is a thread that runs throughout absolutely everything, whether that's pieces around thought leadership, whether that's managing a crisis, whether that's through direct marketing, supporting business growth and commercial interests, promoting visible leadership to add value to your brand and reputation. It's absolutely woven into every aspect.
I agree. And do you feel PR is undervalued by many people?
I think it can be, certainly. I think often there's a lack of understanding of the value of PR. And I think sometimes where the difficulty of that comes is measuring the outputs as a result of PR.
Yeah, it's tricky to measure, isn't it?
It can be. And I think because it doesn't have necessarily a tangible commercial output immediately, it's often difficult to be able to define and to be able to put specific metrics on, as you would do with certain marketing and direct marketing campaigns.
Yeah, it always frustrates me when some people just see it as the fluff.
Yes.
And obviously it's just that, some of it is a lot more subliminal than people realise, or sometimes communicating to people's subconscious minds.
Yes.
So it's all incredibly difficult to track. And how do you measure PR efforts?
I think from a marketing perspective, it's much easier to be able to define sort of metrics because you'll have a chosen outcome that you're looking to achieve. I think from a PR perspective, because for me, this is about building relationships. It's about adding value to your brand and your reputation and protecting that value as well. It's much more difficult. It's a long game. There isn't an immediate short-term result on that. Certainly what we have done in the past when I've been working on PR campaigns is trying to make sure that obviously we've got Google Analytics. We have media monitoring programs set up where we can be able to see the reach and coverage and level of engagements across digital platforms, in particular our social media platforms, and be able to give links to direct people to the final outcome that you're looking to drive them to. So in my previous role, we established a biannual publication which would celebrate the successes and identify the challenges and what was happening on and around the River Tees to be able to promote a collective voice for the River Tees. And we would produce snippets from that publication and then put links on there to drive that back to where the main publication was on our website, and people would need then to input their details to be able to download each of those publication copies. I think you can then look into the background to see what that uptake has been like. So there are metrics that we use. I think often it's also about measuring sentiment, and that's not necessarily easy with defined metrics, but I think that's about that long game that I talk about in terms of building reputation, building those relationships and investing in them long term. And I think that what that actually does as well is develop ambassadors for your business, so other people naturally become advocates for what you are and what you do, and that can pay huge dividends for you at the time when things are a little bit more difficult from a PR perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree, and really believe in the value of ambassadors, whether they've happened intentionally or organic as part of the campaign. Where for me as well, another definition of PR is other people telling you or telling other people how great the company is.
Hugely. And I think that's, one thing which I was a real big advocate for in previous roles is to make sure any PR campaign that you are deploying, to make sure that is backed up and endorsed and supported by those that see the value in the business that you work for and what you're doing and how that's contributing positively to, might be shaping public policy. It might be trying to ensure that we have a stable political environment, supporting business growth and commercial interests. I think that's hugely important to have that advocacy from other stakeholders.
Definitely. And it sometimes goes unnoticed, that element of PR as well.
It does until a time when it's needed.
Totally.
Yes.
And talking of time when things are needed, have you handled many crises in your time in marketing? And if so, how did PR strategies you employed help you overcome them?
I feel really over the last sort of 5 to 8 years in my previous role that I have frequently dealt with various crises. Certainly in previous roles where I've been working in quite hazardous operational environments, they come around a little bit more often than they would do in other industries. I think from that perspective, it's about clarity, it's about calm, it's about trust and demonstrating that you have a situation under control. I think where a lot of the effort goes into managing a crisis, apart from making sure that you absolutely have a robust crisis plan, that you test it, that everybody understands what their role in that crisis is, because when things go wrong, it's difficult to be able to sometimes manage that calmly. So I think as long as everybody understands what their role within that is and it's been tested, then it pretty much becomes par for the course. Yes, each crisis will be different. That's certainly been my experience. They can be wildly different. So even with the best planning and preparation, you've got to be able to pivot and remain calm. But I think certainly having a robust plan in place is absolutely fundamental for every business. But what I would add to that is that for me, managing a crisis comes way before the crisis happens. And it kind of goes back to that point that we just talked about having advocacy from other stakeholders, ambassadors for your business, that if you invest long term in those relationships, in protecting and adding that value, when a crisis comes your way, people will have that reassurance. You'll have that credibility because people will know that that's out of kilter with your normal business operations, and they will have full assurance and confidence that you will very quickly be able to get that under control, be able to deal with it, resolve it, and have resilience to be able to recuperate that from that very quickly and be able to move on with business as usual. So I think the prior preparation to a crisis happening is probably, for me, one of the key strengths of investing in PR that isn't necessarily tangible immediately, but you can bet your bottom dollar when something goes wrong, you can absolutely see that value in managing that risk.
Totally agree. Brilliant answer. And I was smirking throughout that because I tell so many people this all the time. Yeah. So if you're not going to listen to me, please listen to Kirsten. Yeah. She knows what she's talking about. You've done so many you've managed so many crises over your time. It is that planning. It's that preparation. Yeah. It's the testing, because exactly like what you said, when it hits the fan, you go into panic mode. And if you've got a careful step-by-step communications procedure, it helps.
Absolutely. And it takes a long time to put that effort in,
yes,
or get that wrong. And the consequences of that can be, irreparable long term. So I think having that prior preparation is absolutely critical.
Definitely. And there's only so much, obviously, as an agency, we can still add tremendous value on impact of the crisis, in how that's dealt with. But if everything had been planned and prepared for, it can work so much more efficiently. But I love that calm, clarity, maintain that credibility and plan.
And it also allows you to still run the business as usual, because, often communications teams are very small, as we will know, which is often another frustration at times. You've got to be able to keep the business running as normal, still pivot with other things. There may be things that you reduce or dial the volume down, other things you'll want to dial the volume up depending on the nature of the crisis. But you've still got to be able to operate. So it's how quickly you can recover and manage that at the same time. So the better the plans are and the more robust the plans are, it'll allow you to be able to still run business as usual and not divert away from the day-to-day stuff that still needs to be done.
Definitely. And as you said, testing them, because we've done media training, because sometimes all of a sudden if a camera or a microphone's put in front of someone under pressure, they can crumble.
Absolutely.
And
nobody wants to say the wrong thing.
No,
so
exactly.
in that situation where every word that comes out of your mouth is going to be scrutinised, then, it can test the most confident of communicators without a shadow of a doubt.
Definitely. And also that chain of communications you mentioned in terms of who's responsible for dealing with what, that goes into the plan.
Yes.
And, quite often the media, they are smart. They will go through receptionists or kind of people on the front line as well. Yeah. So it's almost like it's no good necessarily having a plan, which all your senior people know.
Yes.
If kind of the people who are answering the phones don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
So really, really critical. Thanks for that answer. That's excellent. And again, as part of a previous role, you managed the communications for many high-profile ministerial visits. How important is lobbying and public affairs as part of a PR strategy?
It's an interesting question, because I think that's another one a little bit where is PR undervalued. I think sometimes it's difficult for people to necessarily see the value in public affairs. As somebody once described it to me, it's like a game of snake and ladders. You can invest an awful lot of time and then there's a reshuffle in the cabinet and people move around and then you're back down and you're starting all over again. I think the main point I would make is the consequences and the risk of not investing can be far more significant than the time that you take that may well have to pivot and shift. It's a bit like any relationship, a marriage, a friendship. It takes time. It takes a lot of investment. It takes understanding. It takes flexibility. It's not always going to work out how you planned, and you might have to consider whether that's a relationship that you want to continue with. Is it actually bringing any value? But I think what's really important for me is every single business and every single individual as a citizen in our country is affected by public policy, not just our business, but those within the supply chain who are impacted by what we do and vice versa, is all impacted by changes in public policy. So we absolutely have to make sure that we have a voice and that we're represented with government. Government have power, government have the funds, but they're not necessarily business people. They don't understand the business landscape and they don't understand what the needs are of the business landscape, future investment, whatever that might be. So it's incumbent on us as businesses to make sure that they are aware of that, to support them in delivering on their manifestos and pledges to the country, but also make sure that that's going to deliver dividends that allows economic growth and job creation and opportunities for people in the country so that we flourish going forward. So it's one of those things that's very, very difficult to be able to manage sentiment. I mean, for the last 3 years, I've gone to party conferences. It's a lot of effort and investment to put in, but I have seen that has delivered returns. And it's also about bringing other stakeholders in for collective lobbying. I mean, certainly last year when I went to the Labour Party conference, we did a whole piece around breaking down barriers for young people, which is a key part of the Labour manifesto. And we went with various stakeholders across charitable and education sectors in the Tees Valley. And that resulted in a commitment from the Education Minister to come up to the Tees Valley to discuss the recommendations that we saw as a result of the barriers that we'd identified, and hopefully that conversation will then lead to some meaningful change for young people.
Brilliant. And again, it highlights the importance of being so strategic with your PR approach and having that longer term vision for your business so you can align it to the government's agenda.
Hugely,
as well.
And I think in business as well, people can often be very sort of task and finish driven. You need to have that mix of strategic thinkers as well as those that are going to look to kind of resolve issues immediately. There needs to be that fine balance, but it's the strategic thinkers and that strategic vision that is going to help overall achieve kind of your long-term business goals.
Yeah, brilliant. And, I know what you're saying about governments change. It can all be quite volatile in government within the people that move on. But however, if someone's a big fan of the business or organisation, they quite often will move somewhere where that's still useful,
Yes.
even if they're less powerful.
Absolutely.
So it goes back to that ambassador, and which is, just incredibly important. So in your opinion, how does PR differ from marketing?
So for me, PR is about that long-term reputation and connection in terms of building that value and protecting that value. Marketing, I see much more specific around supporting commercial interests and business growth. So that's where I see it having more opportunity to have specific measurable outputs, whereas I think PR is much more long-term, working on relationships, working on connections, where you're often more measuring sentiment. Not all the time, but I think they're not mutually exclusive. You know, I think they are hand in glove, absolutely. Yeah. But I do see a distinct difference between the two.
Okay, excellent. What's your favourite PR campaign that you've ever worked on?
My favourite PR campaign has got to be, coming up to probably 3 years ago now, was an idea to launch a biannual publication, which I mentioned, called Bridge, which is about having a collective voice for the River Tees. So identifying opportunities for future investment, identifying the challenges that the region or the wider industry, which I was in previously, which was maritime, was facing, celebrating the successes of everybody on and around the River Tees as a collective. I've really enjoyed seeing that publication grow from strength to strength. It goes out to about 700 different subscribers, local stakeholders, public sector and private sector. It goes into central government as well as regional and local government as well. And I think one of the greatest measures of its success is that we now have a waiting list for people to actually want to take part. Some of that includes people from the public sector and ministers, as well as industry associates, industry bodies, and customers, stakeholders, suppliers. And that was a real pleasure to be involved in something that really highlights the fantastic work that's been doing by businesses and individuals on and around the River Tees. As you know, Charlotte, I'm a proud Teessider. I grew up in Teesside. I live in Teesside. I went to Teesside University to undertake all my sort of further education, and I've had a fantastic career in the Tees Valley over the last 20 plus years, more than I would maybe care to mention. But, you know, there's a lot of fantastic things going on in and around our region. There's lots of great people making things happen. So to be able to bring that together in a publication like Bridge was a bit of a dream come true, maybe, I suppose.
Oh, and I've seen the publication. It's fantastic, such high quality. And it's a perfect example of how creating your owned media can help build PR. You know, people often think about PR as getting placements in other forms of media, but creating your own media, your own publication that you can kind of curate, almost direct the narrative on, is a fantastic way of still building your own trust and credibility, as long as the quality is there, which obviously yours is. And it can also form part of a BD strategy. Because,
hugely, absolutely,
reaching out to people who, again, you're creating some fantastic content, but you're also strengthening the relationship with.
And I think the content, you know, people can see that you understand what's happening within your industry and your business, what's coming over the horizon, where there's gaps, where there's challenges, where the opportunities are, that whole thought leadership piece. I think where that helps with business development is before anybody's even had a conversation with anybody in the business, they've already built a level of trust and confidence in your ability to be able to service their needs as customers. So that really helps get that foot in the door and really start to build those long-term relationships with the customer. Because certainly in my previous roles, they haven't just been purely transactional. It's about building long-term relationships to help those businesses flourish. It's not just a transaction. So that's been really, really important in part of that process.
Brilliant. It's a wonderful example. So Kirsten, how important is personal image when it comes to building a business brand?
Very important for me. I think as an individual looking at a business, say that I would want to work with or work for, I will certainly look at what that business stands for, what the business's ethics and purpose is. And I think the access into the soul of the business is often done through leadership. And certainly both in my old role and the thing that attracted me to go into my new career with Double 11 is largely around that leadership and that people-driven approach. And I think having those good, strong authentic leaders is absolutely fundamental, because you can have all the best PR campaigns in the world. You can have the best narrative, the most targeted content. But if it's not felt and it's not authentic, people see through that. You know, people will know that that connection is disingenuous. So I think having that strong leadership, having that personal brand is hugely important. And I think as an individual as well, making sure that you have your own personal brand helps you kind of transcend your own professional career, the businesses that you work for. You know, people invest in people.
Totally.
People want to invest in you. The business to some degree comes second.
I agree. And it's a noisy old world out there at the minute.
Yeah.
And it's important to be memorable, I think, as a person, which then leads to the business brand being memorable.
Hugely.
Also.
And creating that calm and trust, as you said, it's quite a volatile and unstable environment for many different aspects. And certainly, you know, when we were deploying PR campaigns throughout COVID, having that one single voice of truth and having that calm and that empathy and that understanding from a visible leader does huge in terms of value from internal engagement as well, and in terms of adding value to internal culture. So it's not just the external facing stuff in terms of that visible leadership, but if you have a leader who you buy into and your personal values align with theirs, you will go above and beyond in your role all day long.
I agree. And just to end on, what is your top PR tip, Kirsten?
My top PR tip, probably from recent experience, have a crisis plan. Have a plan. Make sure everybody understands what the plan is. Keep it simple. Test it. And be authentic.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Nobody can do business with you if they don't know about your business. But nobody will do business with you if your business's brand doesn't have trust and credibility. PR is the secret sauce in the marketing mix that can help achieve this and so much more. If you're interested in how PR can help your business, contact Harvey and Hugo, harveyandhugo.com, or email info@harveyandhugo.com.